Joyce, thank you so much for joining us today. As we start, can you talk a little bit about your current role and your background?
Sure. Well, I'm Joyce Brocaglia, and I do kind of two exciting things at the same time. So I founded Alta Associates, the leading executive search firm that specializes in cybersecurity. I guess it's about 39 years ago, back when I was about 12, right? A child prodigy. And so certainly from a cybersecurity standpoint, we've had this unique purview of seeing the evolution of the role of cybersecurity. And I got into cyber way back in 1994. The Russians had hacked into Citigroup. They hired their first ever CISO, a gentleman named Steve Katz, and he said, help me to build this data security team. So really, from the time that cybersecurity became a standalone career, we started placing CISOs and building the teams that support them. 21 years ago, because I'm a Jersey girl that grew up on Wall Street and was pretty much the only woman in the room for most of my career, I founded an organization called the Executive Women's Forum. And today we are, not just the pioneer, but really the premier organization that is just completely committed to building and retaining women leaders in cybersecurity, IT risk, and the privacy area. Last year, I met a woman named Judy von Seldena, and Judy was the chairman of Diversified Search Group. She and I were really kindred spirits. She had started an executive search firm that was focused on diversity. She had started a forum for women in Philadelphia. And then she hired as the CEO a woman that had led a cybersecurity practice at another firm that, was kind of a healthy competitor of ours. So when she and I and Aileen, the current CEO, got together, we decided it would be great to merge our companies. So now, a year later, both the EWF and Alta Associates are owned by Diversified Search Group. So that's a long story, very small.
I understand. That's amazing. We have a lot of members in our community. Affinia is a community of CISOs, but I think their work is very much needed because even to this day, women continue to be underrepresented among VP and director level cybersecurity executives. I think it's a huge opportunity and for women kind of to advance their career in cybersecurity and for companies to engage a more diverse pool of talent. So it's one, it looks like, again, looking at the numbers, you definitely have your work cut out for you. And two, big thanks for doing this amazing work. I think it's very much needed.
Well, thank you. When I started in cybersecurity, there was less than 10% women. We're now probably 24% or so. And I don't want to personally take credit for more than doubling it, but I do believe that the work that we've done in placing leaders through Alta Associates, and especially the work that we've done with the Executive Women's Forum, we have 90 corporate benefactors across every industry, tremendous male allies, CISOs, CIOs in those firms that have really, influenced and impacted probably about 30,000 women that we've put through those programs over the past 20 years. So, it's a testament to how strong our industry is that we're able to change. Certainly the people that are, infiltrating the companies and threat actors are very diverse. And it's important that the workforce that's really being innovative in cybersecurity is equally diverse as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just completely helps fix this groupthink and that's, I guess, a lot less imagined if you have a lot of different voices present in the room. It's absolutely much needed. You probably have seen a lot since you were 12 and since you started in cybersecurity. It seems, one, as a concept, cybersecurity as a concept is just so top of mind for so many more players, I guess, in the corporate world, from the board perspective, from the C-level perspective. I think no one wants to see the company name in the headlines in the wrong light. And I think just understanding how important it is and how much bigger role the technology is playing in our lives and how much more susceptible we are, I guess, to threat actors and actions of groups and countries sometimes that are less than friendly. And as a result, it seems the cybersecurity landscape exploded. I think last time I heard there were over 6,000 companies in cybersecurity space. So it's definitely more top of mind for so many people. Recently, it seems, given the headwinds, the economic headwinds, there's a lot of turmoil in the industry in general, kind of in cybersecurity in particular. From your vantage point, what are your views on the current state of the market?
Yeah. Well, even though the general market is experiencing cutbacks, what I can tell you is that we still are seeing a very strong market for cybersecurity leaders. Kind of to the point that you were making, cybersecurity is ubiquitous, right? It affects every part of the company. But, sometimes people think of cyber as being narrow and technically focused, when the reality is cybersecurity is much broader than just cyber, right? It encompasses IT risk, business continuity, data protection, governance risk and compliance. So there's a lot of pieces that go into cyber. And yes, to some extent, we've seen some contraction in those companies in terms of the staff, and maybe they're combining roles. But certainly at the leadership level, the company's boards are more aware of cybersecurity than ever before, right? Look at what the pandemic did for increasing the threat environment just by virtue of everyone going remote, right? People
Absolutely.
that weren't ready to digitally transform were kind of forced into that digital transformation. Boards are now really questioning, and actually the SEC is even looking to new rulings whereby they will require boards to have a digital savvy person on the board. So I think that, everybody from, the person next door to you to somebody that's deeply involved in technology is aware of cybersecurity. We just launched a search this morning for a financial services company looking for a CISO. We have 4 or 5 more in the pipeline. So we see the market still strong, but we see it strong for key areas, that role of the CISO. Oftentimes I talk to CISOs about kind of their next career, and I'm actually doing a LinkedIn Live session next week with Mike Towers, and he's the Chief Digital Trust Officer at Takeda. So he had that role of CISO. So we're seeing the role of CISO also being expanded to take on resiliency and trust and governance and sometimes data. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for people who have cybersecurity experience. I think the market is still strong for those leaders. And, our specialty is really finding those diverse and talented leaders to put into those organizations. And we're busier than ever. So
it's amazing.
So yeah, I think the outlook is still good.
Excellent. And do you see this across the board, or do you see maybe some industries, you mentioned financial services, are kind of maybe a little bit stronger than others? And also, is this interest in companies to bring talent at the senior level as far as cybersecurity is concerned? Do you see it more at large organizations with a sophisticated cybersecurity footprint and a very developed org? Or is it kind of mid-size, maybe early stage? What do you see?
Yeah, so what's interesting is Alta Associates client base is everything from PE, VC-backed companies all the way through to, we made a recent placement of a CISO, with a well into the 7-figure salary, right? So it's not one size fits all when it comes to CISOs in terms of compensation or in terms of roles and requirements. What we're seeing now, if you were to ask me kind of what are the key attributes that companies are looking for, what types of companies, many companies are coming to us, some of them for the first time CISO, but honestly, the majority of companies that are coming to us are saying, you know what, Joyce, we want you to do a confidential search because we already have a CISO in place, but we recognize what got us here isn't what's going to get us where we need to go. And what they're looking for has less to do with technical acumen and has a lot more to do with their ability to, have a more holistic approach to risk, to understand business goals and drivers, to see cybersecurity as an enabler of those goals and those drivers, someone that can collaborate with key stakeholders, someone that can work with them in their efforts to do, transformational technology changes that are happening. So maybe work with the CIO. A lot of our work is with highly regulated, high transaction companies. So yes, financial services and healthcare. So also having the ability to, deal with regulators, understanding, privacy impact. So the job of the CISO has gotten so broad, but then I could flip and say that we also had, a PE-backed company that is doing, veterinary medicine, and they made acquisitions of veterinary emergency groups, and they pulled all the veterinary emergency practices together, and then they needed a CISO, right? So very different from the financial services, multiple seven figures job was this, PE group of veterinary practices that were pulled together and now recognize that they need a CISO. So we're seeing it at all levels. We are seeing those first-time CISOs, but for the most part, we're seeing people that are actually elevating that role and looking for what I would call that new breed of CISO.
I understand. And the new breed, it sounds like someone who would not only have the technical background, but also more of the softer skills that would enable them to work across the organizations, the different functions, and maybe communicate with the board. So it's just not who's just very technical and specialized in cybersecurity from the tools perspective, but also someone who can play on a larger team and understand the mandate of the CEO and help enable them and provide insights to the board in the way that the board would find useful and acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you mentioned soft skills. I think the soft skills are the hard skills, right? I think they're the skills that matter. The searches that we're doing, the technical competency at the level that we're speaking of is almost assumed with the people that we're presenting as candidates, right? We're showing them people that, have come up through the ranks. They may have worked in networks or operations or engineering in their past. They certainly have, been there, done that, managed the teams that do it. But where they're lacking is, the ability to do the crossover, the ability to take that technical jargon and turn it into business impact and implications, the ability to present to the board in a meaningful way, and the business acumen that it takes to understand the broader corporate goals and how cybersecurity can really help the company achieve them, right? So what are the broader risks? How do we identify the risks? How do we understand the risks? How do we mitigate those risks? How do we get people to sign off on them? And then, do you have the ability to present to either the audit committee or the risk committee? And those are difficult skills. And some of the problems that I see, quite honestly, is, companies are asking us to find those people. Yet the companies themselves that have CISOs in place, or when I talk to about succession planning, often aren't thinking about giving their successors those kinds of experiences, right? Because the cyber budgets are tight, and because everybody seems to be fairly overwhelmed that's in cybersecurity, they're often not giving them stretch assignments. They're not giving them P&L responsibility. They're not allowing them to rotate out of cyber into areas that they could get the exact experience they want them to have once they're in that C-suite. And I see that as a real conundrum.
Certainly. And kind of with this in mind, this is definitely, I can imagine, something that companies would want, kind of a more rounded and seasoned executive, whether they may or may not be liking kind of an internal track for people to grow into that role internally, and maybe they're looking for someone outside. But what are some of the other things companies usually look in a CISO when they're hiring?
Well, like the call today, the company had a smaller team, right? So that person that is going to be a successful CISO has to have that immediate technology credibility to the team, right? Mm-hmm. So they want someone, who can get down and dirty and talk to the engineers. That is completely different, than the next CISO role that we fill. So much of the CISO description of what companies are looking for is very specific to the actual maturity level of the team that's built there. What has the person that had the role in the past? They've broken glass and created tough relationships, and this person needs to go in and smooth them over and kind of build the reputation of the cybersecurity department back up. Maybe there's a roadmap that's in place, but it hasn't actually been executed. Maybe there's a roadmap that's fully executed, maybe they just had a major breach. I mean, the most high profile retail breach that occurred, we're the firm that came in and placed the CISO post that. And when that person's name is going to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and the board is really going to be looking to that person to change the reputational brand of that company, not just their cybersecurity department, it becomes a different search. It becomes a different vision that you have to have when we're certainly interviewing candidates. So, when I talk to CISOs, and whether they're kind of a prominent CISO or they're just somebody that's aspiring to be one, I always say there's kind of three questions that should be top of mind for them. I would say the first is think about, are you positioned for success? And what I mean by that is, do they have the right access, and the support from the most senior executives in their organization to really accomplish their mission, right? Because what I've seen oftentimes is companies say they're going to hire, a head of cyber or a CISO, but then they don't put them in the proper organizational structure, right? So, if you're not sitting in the right spot organizationally, then the actual influence that you're able to wield and the budget and the technology talent that you're able to get funded is very different, right? So if somebody is new to the organization, and they're, letting you do what you were hired to do, that's great. But I've had a lot of people often feel like it's kind of a bait and switch. They brought me in and they told me I was going to do this, and the reality is there's no budget or the reporting structure is different. So, I think that you have to look at, am I positioned for success? And then think about doing something about that if the answer is no. And that could be externally in terms of finding a new role, but it could also be internally in correcting that alignment, right? So, make sure that you're dedicating time to, strengthen those internal relationships and also kind of strengthen the external relationships. At the Executive Women's Forum, we have a program called LIFT, which is an amazing mentorship program. And we pair mentees and mentors together for 6 months. And, one of the things the women like about it the most is that they're being mentored from somebody outside of their organization. So even though their companies might have, mentorship programs, it's very different, So I always tell people, have that personal board of directors, that go-to group of people that you could rely on.
It's very important, I think. I just want to double click on the first question that you said that CISOs should ask themselves, which I think is very important, because I think in one way, CISO's role is very challenging in a way that if everything goes well in a company, then it's usually the CEO or chief revenue officer or the board gets the credit. And very, very few people know the battles that CISOs are fighting every day, trying to keep the organization and the customers and the data safe. And they don't get the credit for success, but if things fall apart, somehow it's all eyes are on them. And I think it's a bit unfair. And to your point, kind of to pull on this thread a little bit, you don't want to put yourself in a position when it becomes a fool's errand from the get-go, when you are tasked with much but given very little. So if you're stepping into something where expectations are high, but you are under-resourced, it's probably not something, however much you want a role, you don't want to put yourself in that position. And that takes some due diligence and asking questions beforehand, so to make sure that it's a successful engagement for all involved. I think it's very important.
Yeah, and that's where, and I don't want to sound self-serving here, but that's where an executive search firm, that earns its keep, both for the candidate and for the client, right? Because what we do, as a search firm is really spend time on what we call a launch call, with those hiring executives, understanding, what got you to this point. If it's because you're replacing someone and you want to elevate that role, what is the gap that you're trying to fill, and why was there a gap? And we really kind of delve deep into the culture of the organization, certainly the technical competencies for the role, but what will success look like, and how then can we continuously refine the search as we're talking to people to find people, that are that good fit, right? Because it's about, can do, will do, and fit, right? Those are kind of the three pieces, right? The culture, the ability, and the skills. But the fit is so important because, the fit is what's going to keep people there. The fit is going to be what's inspiring to others to be there. And, I think it's why we're so good at what we do, because we fill so many jobs in cybersecurity that we understand the nuances and we can talk to people and figure out, are they really the right fit for what this company is looking for? And then they don't waste time, because otherwise they can search for 6 or 9 months and then they finally hire someone. And I've seen it happen. And, I look at LinkedIn and I think, wow, that is not going to work, and inevitably it doesn't. So, it's kind of cool.
Well, I think it takes experience and empathy to understand both the clients and the CISOs, because at the end of the day, as you said, you want both the candidate and the company to be successful, because that's how you get return engagements, I guess. I know we're coming up on time, Joyce, and I really appreciate you taking time for this. As I mentioned, a lot of our members, they found themselves in a position of either actively or passively looking for their new career opportunity, maybe for the first time in many years. Some of them maybe even a decade or so. So it's for them, they're kind of reacquiring the skills of, quote unquote, of being on the market. And it's important kind of to invest time wisely and not to make mistakes. So from that perspective, and from your experience and from your vantage point, what are some of the things you recommend people focus on? And on the flip side, what are some of the mistakes you see CISOs in that position do as they embark on their search for a new chapter?
I mean, I think, the first thing is the resume, right? Because, if you're fortunate enough to be working with a search firm like myself, it's not the resume that's going to get you in the door. It's our personal introductions. But a lot of people, are in a point in their time where they're seeing things online or they're sending things out. So what I would recommend is when you put your resume together, make sure it doesn't look like a job description. Make sure you really focus on what your accomplishments are and how you've moved the needle forward. So that could be new programs that you've implemented, revenue that you've helped generate, money that you've helped save, the types of teams that you've managed. If you have, regulated type of experiences, if you have experiences outside, all of that is important. At the most senior level, they're really looking for, as I've said along, a combination of skills. So make sure that your resume is not narrowly focused and then doesn't just look like a listing of things that you've done. And then when you're on an interview, if you're working with a search firm, we will certainly tell you as much as we know about the job. If you're not working with a search firm, do your homework. Look at the earnings call, look at the mission statement of the company, be familiar with the executive team, read the job description if there is one, and think about ahead of time, how is what you're doing uniquely qualified for that job? And then tell stories. I think people love to hear stories. I think I've made my living out of telling stories about people, telling stories to people. So tell the story of why they would want to hire you. And, I think be aware that your answers are succinct, that they're deliberate in answering the question that was asked of you, but be inquisitive. Have a set of questions to ask of you, because remember that you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Joyce, thank you so much for your time. Where can our CISO members what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so, you could always reach me at joyce@altaassociates.com. And if you're interested in more information about the Executive Women's Forum, which, like I said, is amazing for corporations to join, it's ewf-usa.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.